Today, we are back at Street Machinery, Hot Rods and Classic Cars, located in Elucid, Ohio. They specialize in the late 50s, 60s, GMs, especially the X-Frame cars. The link is in the description. We're going to take a look at this 1960 Chevy Impala convertible. But before we take the tour, welcome to What It's Like. This channel, we feature the classics, vintage, some exotics, lots of orphan cars, and cars that are off the beaten path. If that sounds like something that interests you, hit the subscribe button. Turn on the bell icon next to it to never miss a video. If you dig the content, be sure to give us a like button so more people can see this video in the future. Before going into the Impala, let's talk 1960 Chevy lineup. 1960 was a big year for Chevy. Chevy offered a brand new line of cars called Corvair, and the Corvair was totally different than anything Chevy made up to that point, or since for that matter. Corvair was available in many different body styles, and it was Chevy's compact car offering. Chevy offered 3 models for its large size cars. Biscayne was at the bottom, Bel Air was in the middle, and Impala was at the top of the heap. They also offered the Corvette, and there was a series of wagons, with the Nomad still carrying the highest price tag for the wagon line. Chevy also offered the El Camino, which was sort of America's version of a Ute. Moving on to the Impala could be had as a 4-door sedan, a 2-door sports coupe, 4-door sports sedan, or 2-door convertible. Moving on to some specs. 1960 is considered the second generation, the last year of the second generation. Second generation ran from 1959 to 1960. 210.8 inches long, 79.8 inches wide, 58.1 inches tall. It rides a wheelbase of 119 inches. It weighs 3,700 pounds. The price was $3,000 in 1960, which would be equivalent to you spending $29,624.59 in 2022. Production. GM Chevy had a stellar 1960 year. They sold 1,653,168 units, of which 79,903 of them were Impala convertibles. Moving to engines, Chevy offered a ton of engines this year. Basically 3 different engine designs with a bunch of different flavors. At the base engine was the 235 cubic inch displacement inline 6, 3.9 liters for metric folks, 135 horsepower at 4,000 RPMs. The bore was 3.6 inches, has a stroke of 3.9 inches, compression 8.25 to 1, 4 main bearings. The block/crankcase is made out of cast iron, and it was fed through a 2-barrel carburetor. Chevy offered 2 flavors of the 283 V8. 283 V8, 4.6 liters, 170 brake horsepower at 4,200 RPM, 275 foot-pounds of torque at 2,200 RPM. The bore was 3.9 inches, stroke was 3 inches, compression 9.50 to 1, had 5 main bearings, and this one was fed through a 2-barrel carburetor. The other flavor of the 283 V8 4.6 liter produced 230 horsepower at 4,800 RPM, 300 foot-pounds of torque at 3,000 RPM. Bore and stroke were the same, but compression was 8.50 to 1, 5 main bearings. It was fed through a 4-barrel carburetor. Block is the same material. Block/crankcase is made out of cast iron. Things get really interesting. Full-size Chevys offered 5 versions of the 348 cubic inch displacement WV8. It was 5.7 liters for you metric folks. Base engine made 250 brake horsepower at 4,400 RPM, 355 foot-pounds of torque at 2,800 RPM. Bore was 4.1 inches, stroke was 3.3 inches, compression was 9.50 to 1, 5 main bearings. The block material, the block or crankcase was made out of was cast iron, and this one was fed with a 4-barrel carburetor. Moving to the next 348 V8 offering, this one had 305 horsepower at 5,600 RPM, 350 foot-pounds of torque at 3,600 RPM. Compression ratio was 11 to 1. Next 348 offering 320 horsepower at 5,600 RPM, 358 foot-pounds of torque at 3,600 RPM. The compression ratio on this one was 11.25 to 1. If you wanted to be totally different than the rest of everybody else out there and have just a wee bit more bling underneath your hood, Chevy was more than happy to oblige with two variations of the 348 that offered tri-power or 3 two-barrel carburetors. The first variant had 280 horsepower at 4,800 RPM, 355 foot-pounds of torque at 3,200 RPM, and the compression ratio was 9.50 to 1. The other one made 335 horsepower at 5,800 RPM, 362 foot-pounds of torque at 3,600 RPM, and the compression ratio was 11.25 to 1. 3 transmissions were on offer, and a lot of times it depended on what engine / what horsepower rating you got for each transmission that was offered. 3-speed synchro mesh unit, which was a column shift like 3 on the tree, 2-speed power glide, or they offered the turbo glide, which was a 3-speed. And the easiest way to tell if it had the turbo glide transmission is a shift indicator was marked G for grade retarder. What this feature essentially did was it would accelerate the engine RPM up to 2.67 times faster than the drive shaft speed, causing the engine to have that engine braking effect. Suspension: independent front suspension with long and short control arms, ball joints, and coil springs. Direct double acting shocks. In the rear, they used a 4-link arrangement with coil springs. The brakes were 11-inch drum brakes. And things to watch out for: pinion bearing failures are common in the axles. Options: not going through all the options, just going through some that stuck out. Air conditioning: they offered 2 types of air conditioning: Cool Pack Deluxe. Power seats, power windows, cruise control, a vacuum to suck the ashes into a container in the trunk, speed miner warning device, compass, 4-way hazards, rear window defrosters. Before getting in there and showing you what the door panel looks like, but just notice this crease. This crease goes the whole way down here, and then it bends into the front. It's coming all the way back, and then it hits the chrome part here, and it goes all the way out the back. Just check out this door panel. There's a lot going on. Different colors, different textures. It feels too nice to be vinyl, but it could just be a special kind of vinyl that they came out with then. I love this part here. Armrest door handle, whatever you use it for. Notice the door handle to get out. This is a window crank for the vent window. This is the window crank for the big window. It's all trimmed out. While we're down here, let's take a look at this pedal box. This is for a vent that's located right here. There's one on the passenger side as well that does the same thing, just operates the vent on the opposite side. Emergency brake, brake release here. There's a toggle switch here. I'm not entirely sure what that's for. There's also this doohickey. I'm not entirely sure what that's for either. Brakes. It says power brakes on there. Gas pedal. Here's how the rear window operates. I love how they turn. And that's a feature from cars of this era. A nice gasket here so it doesn't leak. On then to the button switches and knobs. 5 pods sit in front of the driver, 2 small pods and then a larger, bigger center pod. The first pod has 2 gauges in it, the generator and oil pressure. Next to it, temperature. Just off to the right of the temperature gauge is the speedometer with the odometer at the bottom. The turn signal indicators are flanking on each side of the odometer as little round circles. Just to the right of the speedometer is the gas gauge, and just to the right of the gas gauge is the clock. Moving to the gear selector, it reads park, reverse, neutral, drive, low. This one has the 2-speed power glide because it does not have a position for G. Right under the generator and oil pod, there are headlight switch, as well as the wipers are just to the right of that, right underneath the temperature gauge. Coming back to the other side, just below the gas gauge, are the climate controls: fan, defrost, heat, air. Right next to it is the ignition switch, radio with radio controls, and right underneath that is a sliding out ashtray and cigarette lighter. Notice the courtesy lights are down inside here. There's one on each side down there. There's one over there. There's lots of lights in this car. Underneath the dash, both sides. This is how I get into these cars. I never hit my knee. I use that just like that, and then I slide in. This is what it's like to look over the hood of this thing. Behind the wheel impression right here, of all the gauges and the steering wheel, as well as over the hood. The steering wheel is touching my thigh just a little bit, but it's not terrible. Some sun visors. And a nice rear view mirror. All right, moving on to the glove box test. Here's the glove box. Oh man, there's lots of room in that one. And notice the cup holder indentations on the glove box. A lot of times that was an option. Notice there's no gas filler because the gas filler is right here, which is an awesome feature because if you have one of these cars, you could park on either side of the gas pump. It doesn't matter which one. All right, getting into the back of the trunk. So just check out this massive, massive trunk. Alright, coming up to the under the hood section. This one looks very straightforward. Handles right here. All one motion. I didn't do it all one motion. That's why it didn't open. This one's got power brakes as well as a dual master cylinder. Upgraded alternator. Windshield washer tank back there. Notice the engine coolant container. I'm not sure if that's stock. As well as the container back there. I'm not 100% sure that that's stock either. They had like a bag, I believe. When you shut these, you don't have to slam them. Just bring them down nice and gent. And then you can hear this. You can hear that hitting off the top. Like that. Just push it the rest of the way. All right, on to the pros and cons section. I am getting all these pros and cons from the complete book of collectible cars, Blue Chip Auto Investments, 70 years from 1930 to 2000 by Richard M. Langworth and the Auto Editors of Consumer Guide. On the positive side, unique styling, reliable, well-known engines, still easily maintainable today, affordable and readily available. Against it, brakes tend to overheat and fade. They are rust-prone. Slow manual steering tries to avoid it. Dull performance with the 6-cylinder, far less wieldy than classic 1955 through 57 Chevy models. I disagree with that. I think when you see one of these at a car show, it's a breath of fresh air. Everybody has a 55, 56, 57 Chevy, and it gets really mundane when you go to a car show and there's 50, 57 Chevys. You know, oh, so-and-so's got another 57 Chevy. Not poo-pooing on 57 Chevys.
Also,
just share
still
the channel with anybody
everywhere.
that you know that likes classic cars. We're trying to grow this channel to be one of the go-to, if not the go-to classic car channel for anybody that's looking to get into this hobby and knows nothing about classic cars. Thank you all so much for all the support. And until next time,